Harry's Wife, Part 102.82. The Crown, Postpones, Docu-series. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. You will be familiar with The Crown, Netflix's successful portrayal of the royal family over the decades. Of course, many people fail to understand that whilst it's based on real events, a lot of it is utter speculation with regard to plot arcs and conversations, and it really ought to come with that warning before each episode, because unfortunately some marshmallow-brained individuals believe that what it's portraying is a reenactment of actual events. The Crown, of course, is having a number of impacts, however. First of all, let's go to the Mail Online, where Sarah Vine asks, how can Prince Harry take the Netflix dollar when they so cruelly exploit his own family? She writes, I must confess, I am not a huge fan of The Crown. I watched the first few series more out of professional duty than anything else, and found it irritatingly one-dimensional, reductive, and exhaustingly cliched, little more than a high-budget soap. Unlike other shows about the royal family, which either seek to satirize or stylize their existence, The Crown is mawkish and exploitative. Its makers have never viewed the real-life counterparts of their on-screen characters with any sort of humanity, seeing their lives, loves, and personal tragedies as nothing more than a gold mine to be exploited for maximum profit. Fair enough, you might say, that's showbiz. But what's really sad is that in this respect they have arguably much in common with two of the royal family's own most high-profile members, the Duke and Duchess of Sussex, who financed their move to America by joining Netflix payroll to the tune of several $1 million. People have often expressed a certain amount of consternation that the Queen's grandson should willingly take the shilling of an outfit which has, over the years, been at best economical with his family's truth, or at worst, downright exploitative. But to my mind, it makes perfect sense. After all, their objectives seem to me to be perfectly aligned. Make as much money out of the firm as possible. Now, of course, this attitude of making as much money out of the firm and exploiting the connection comes from who? Harry's wife, of course. If Harry and Harry's wife had remained within the royal family, doing the public service, the meeting, the greeting, the opening the supermarkets, the hello, have you travelled far, the cutting of the ribbons, doing the charity gigs, him continuing with his Invictus games, etc., they would have been supported by the Crown in terms of payment of security, payment of accommodation, payment of transport, and so forth. And they wouldn't have to be concerning themselves with shilling for a living. However, as you know, as a consequence of Harry's wife's narcissism, rather than be bolted on to the institution in the way that other narcissists do, she fought it, and in effect she lost, because her narcissism compelled her to assert control by withdrawal, causing her to flee over the ocean, dragging Ginger Bollocks behind her. This meant that financially their options then became limited with regard to support from the Crown, and quite naturally, why would the Crown support them if they're no longer carrying out royal duties? This meant that they had to go and actually earn a living elsewhere. And of course, Harry's wife, in accordance with her somatic nature, has expensive tastes. She wants the best of the best. She wants to live in the tasteless huge house. She wants to buy lots of expensive clothing that doesn't look good on her. She wants to fly by private jet, notwithstanding her supposed eco-credentials. She wants to eat in expensive places, and so on and so forth. She wants a staff running around after her, and of course all of that costs a lot of money. And therefore it was necessary to ensure that money came from somewhere to pay for all of this. Her acting talents are limited, and it would be unlikely that anybody would offer her a part other than perhaps Netflix, so she could play herself in The Crown, something she'd absolutely love, enabling her to spew more and more lies undoubtedly. And therefore it became the case that she'd have to try and reinvent herself as something, and did so using the one thing that she had of use, her connection to the royal family, and, in popular parlance, the ability to spill the tea. Harry, of course, won't have been happy with this. He has a semblance of loyalty, or at least did, but it's been steadily eroded by the demands of his wife. Caught between a rock and a hard place, Captain Dimwit finds himself in this position. I'm not really sure we ought to be doing this, darling. Harry, you better, otherwise... Zzz, zzz. And out come the cattle prods again. Those of you who have been ensnared by a narcissist will recognise those situations where you knew what the narcissist was doing was wrong, but ultimately, in order to keep the peace, because you lived with them, you were married to them, you went along with it. And that's what Harry has been indulging in. Of course, his own resentment of his family has enabled him to foolishly think that he's getting his own back, but he's been royally played, of course, by his wife, who, guided by her narcissism, has manipulated him into using his own traits of resentment and argumentativeness and anger against him, exploiting those vulnerabilities so that she can persuade him to engage with her in signing up for large contracts to then merge their connection. Accordingly, it's not difficult to understand why Harry has basically sold out his family. The sustained pressures of his manipulative wife and the necessity of an income because they don't have one because he foolishly allowed her to take him away from the institution that actually served him well meant that they had to earn their own corn elsewhere. Returning to the article, Sarah Vine writes, "The Crown does this in terms of making money out of the firm by spinning half-truths and gossip into high-ratings drama, which people, particularly Americans, swallow without question. Meanwhile, the Duke and Duchess trade off their associations with the folks back home, all the while trashing the institution that feeds them by casting themselves as victims of some amorphous conspiracy. Why on earth wouldn't they get into bed with Netflix? It is the perfect partnership." The latest kick in the teeth for the royals, which let's not forget have just suffered a colossal bereavement, comes in episode 1 of the 5th series, which covers from 1991 to 1996, encompassing the breakdown of Charles's marriage to Diana. It opens with the late Queen being depicted, aged 65, as a hopeless has-been, stuck in the past and desperate to cling on to power beyond her sell-by date, despite the wishes of her people, who, according to a poll, wish she would abdicate. It's not even a month since she was finally laid to rest at Windsor, but that doesn't bother Netflix. Business is business. Ratings are ratings. If anything, they probably calculated that their death will make it more likely that people will tune in. No matter that her son, King Charles, is still grieving. Now he faces being portrayed as a pushy usurper, desperate to get his mother out of the way so he can get his mitts on her crown. Not only is it monstrously disrespectful, it's downright cruel, but that doesn't matter, because let's not forget, the royals aren't real people anyway, they're just cash cows for Netflix executives. In some ways, though, you can't blame them. They're just doing their jobs. Prince Harry, on the other hand, now that's a whole other matter. These are his so-called loved ones, his family, his father and grandmother, who are being exploited. You might have thought he would at the very least want nothing to do with the perpetrators, very possibly speak out against them. After all, he's not exactly backwards in coming forwards when it comes to voicing his grievances with other sectors of the media. But no, not a peep. Funny that. Leave it to Prince Harry's brother to tell the truth and shame the devil. The Prince of Wales accused Netflix of profiteering from his family, and in particular his mother's infamous Panorama interview, obtained by Martin Bashir under false pretenses, which will also be depicted in the upcoming series. Accordingly, this demonstrates that the thirst for the crown goes ahead, and the author, of course, questions why on earth would Harry take the dollar from them, and I've explained why. Let's go below the line for a moment to understand what's going on in terms of the views of other people. LLRM. Because he and his wife only care about dollars, and they both have an axe to grind. They're sad, angry, little people with no other way to make a buck. Dan K. Because he's one long temper tantrum fueled by his odious spouse. Just a hunch. Bad Banana. He's morphed into a Markle. He'll do just about anything to make money. F male, because they will do anything for money, not a moral bone in either of their bodies. Marshall, simple. His wife is on record saying she needs $12 million per month to live. If he wants to keep the missus happy, he'll have to stoop to anything. Radio Silencia. They've commodified the strained relationships they created. It's difficult to see why people support this. I get they wear nice clothes and support nice causes, but that's not nice. Veritas 1. Harry and Harry's wife are globally loathed. Even their self-awards arranged by their PR team is pure cringe. They are transparent. Fit and Happy. What would it take for their titles to be removed? They have already done countless things to damage the royal family. This Netflix deal is going to be devastating. Very clear what people's views are in terms of how Harry and Harry's wife are seen as, quite simply, looking to merch without any consideration for how that impacts. However, whilst that author talks about the impact of the Crown and how Harry is quite content to take the Netflix dollar, notwithstanding the fact that another Netflix production is bashing his family, news comes from OK by Stephanie Kaplan, which tells us Harry's wife and Prince Harry's Netflix docu-series reportedly delayed due to backlash over the Crown. Netflix has pressed pause on Prince Harry and Harry's wife's docu-series. The project was expected to debut later this year, but it's now been delayed due to backlash over the upcoming season of The Crown, which will premiere on the streaming service on Wednesday, November the 9th. According to a report, some were outraged after learning the fifth season contains a negative plotline about King Charles and John Major, the former UK Prime Minister. They are rattled at Netflix, the insider spilled, and they blinked first and decided to postpone the documentary. The storyline in question takes place in 1991 and was based on a real-life newspaper poll that asked British citizens whether the ageing Queen Elizabeth should step down and give the throne to Charles. In the show, Charles, who's portrayed by Dominic West, agrees that his mother should abdicate and then vents his frustrations to Major. However, Major stated the interaction never happened and called the fictional story malicious nonsense. According to the new report, Netflix has already been on edge about the new season of The Crown due to Queen Elizabeth's death last month. The company is also worried over the portrayal of Princess Diana's death, even though they've already stated that her fatal car crash in 1997 won't be shown explicitly. To be going back to Paris and turning Diana's final days and hours into a drama feels very uncomfortable, one source told an outlet. Finally, some of the crew members are pushing back. The show always tries to present a fictional version of royal history with as much sensitivity as possible, but lately, as things get closer to the present day, it feels harder to strike that balance, the source noted to The Sun. With some of those moments still fresh and upsetting, it feels as though a line is being crossed. Deadline was the first to report on the docu-series delay. Whether that is correct, and what it will mean for Harry's wife and her money, remains to be seen. If she's done her part, she'll still expect to be paid. But it now demonstrates that the tide of public opinion is having an impact. That if there is backlash about what the Crown is doing, the other arm of Netflix is nervous about how the docu-series will be received. Which, to my mind, is pretty ridiculous. Because rather than getting their panties in a twist about backlash from the Crown, surely they would be thinking, actually, very few people like Harry and Harry's wife. Do we really want to proceed with this docu-series? Furthermore, it's likely to be packed with lies, and it's only going to cause more and more people to lambast it and them. Do we really want to proceed with it? And it might be that they're so suitably nervous about this that they're going to torpedo it. Who knows? It's very much a fluid situation, but it demonstrates and underlines the way that many people see both Harry and Harry's wife as simply, as always, in it for themselves. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.